The champagne flute slipped from Jules's fingers when I said it. The crystal hit her hardwood floor with a sharp crack that made everyone in the baby shower circle freeze mid-conversation. 12 faces turned toward me, their smiles fading like someone had dimmed the lights. "What did you just say?" Jules whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her 7-month belly. I laughed, the sound bright and careless in the sudden silence. "I said Eli's my safety net. You know, like insurance. He's steady, reliable, pays the bills on time." I gestured toward the kitchen where my husband was quietly arranging the gift bags we'd brought. "Victor gives me excitement, passion, adventure. Eli gives me security." The words hung in the air like smoke. Tara Lynn, my colleague from the hospital communications department, actually gasped. Her coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down with shaking hands. "Ivo," she said carefully, "are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I'm a modern woman who knows what she wants." I crossed my legs and leaned back in Jules's expensive accent chair, feeling powerful and sophisticated. "Some people have investment portfolios. I have relationship portfolios. Diversification is smart financial planning, right?" Maya, my 6-year-old daughter, was coloring on the floor nearby, her blonde head bent over a princess coloring book. She looked up at the strange quiet that had fallen over the room. "Mommy, why is everyone being weird?" she asked in that piercing way children have of cutting through adult pretense. "They're not being weird, sweetheart," I said, ruffling her hair. "They're just learning about grown-up relationships." But even as I spoke, I noticed Eli had moved closer to the living room. He stood in the doorway between the kitchen and where we sat, his postal inspector uniform still crisp, despite the long Saturday shift he'd just finished. His face was completely blank, which should have been my first warning. Eli was never blank. He was quiet, yes, methodical and reserved, but never blank. "Eli, honey," I called out sweetly, "tell everyone how happy we are with our arrangement." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started tapping the screen. At first, I thought he was checking work emails. He was always getting called in for investigations, tracking down mail fraud cases, and document forgeries. It was boring work, really, all that attention to detail and evidence collection. "Seriously, Ivo," Jules said, struggling to lean forward with her pregnant belly. "You're talking about cheating on your husband, in front of him, at my baby shower." "I'm talking about being honest about my needs," I corrected. "Victor understands me in ways that Eli never could. He's sophisticated, successful, knows how to make a woman feel alive. But Eli—" I glanced at my husband, who was still focused on his phone screen. "Eli's my foundation, steady, predictable, safe." Rosa Marchant, Eli's mother, had been helping serve refreshments from the kitchen. She appeared behind her son now, her face pale and drawn. At 58, she'd raised Eli to be exactly the kind of man she thought I should treasure. Responsible, faithful, hard-working. The disappointment in her eyes was almost tangible. "Ivolina," she said quietly, using my full name like she had when Maya was born, and she'd held her granddaughter for the first time. "What are you doing?" "I'm being authentic, Rosa, something your generation never learned how to do." The cruelty in my own voice surprised me, but I was committed now. These women, with their traditional ideas about marriage and fidelity, they just didn't understand. I was brave enough to live honestly, to refuse to be trapped by outdated social conventions. "Authentic?" Tara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're talking about using your husband like a bank account while you screw around with someone else. That's not authentic, Ivo. That's sociopathic." "Don't be so dramatic." I waved her off. "Eli knows I need more than he can give me. He's accepted it because he loves me." Finally, Eli spoke. His voice was quiet, measured, the same tone he used when explaining postal regulations to confused customers. "Have I accepted it, Ivo?" Something in his tone made my stomach flutter, but I pushed the feeling away. This was Eli. Boring, predictable Eli, who organized his socks by color, and had eaten the same breakfast every morning for the past 8 years. "Of course you have," I said. "You're not stupid, honey. You know I need intellectual stimulation, emotional connection, physical passion. You provide stability. Victor provides everything else." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Maya had stopped coloring and was staring at the adults with wide, confused eyes. Jules cleared her throat. "I think maybe we should open some more gifts." But nobody moved. The baby shower gifts sat forgotten on the coffee table, while 12 women processed what they'd just heard. Some looked shocked, others disgusted. A few seemed genuinely frightened, as if my honesty about marriage had revealed something dangerous about their own relationships. "You're all being ridiculous," I said, standing up and smoothing my dress. "I'm the only one here brave enough to admit that one person can't meet all your needs. You're all lying to yourselves if you think your husbands are enough." "My husband is enough," said Carmen Rodriguez, Jules' sister-in-law, her voice shaking with anger, "because I married someone I actually love." "Love is a fairy tale," I replied. "I have something better. I have a system that works." That's when I noticed Eli had moved to the window. His phone was still in his hand, but now he was holding it differently. The screen was facing the room, and a small red dot indicated he was recording. "Eli," I said, my voice rising slightly, "what are you doing?" He looked at me directly for the first time since I'd started talking. His brown eyes, usually so warm and patient, were completely cold. "I'm documenting," he said simply. "It's what I do." The flutter in my stomach became a full churning, but I forced myself to laugh. "Documenting what? A conversation among friends." "A confession," he said. Then he turned back to his phone and continued recording. Maya tugged on my dress. "Mommy, I want to go home." "We will, baby," I said, but my eyes were fixed on Eli. Daddy's just being silly with his phone. But even as I said it, I realized this moment had shifted something fundamental. The way the other women were looking at me had changed. The way Rosa was looking at me had changed. Even the way Maya was clinging to my leg felt different, more desperate. Jules struggled to her feet, one hand supporting her back. "I think maybe this party is over." "Oh, come on," I protested. "We haven't even finished opening gifts." "Yes," Jules said firmly, "we have." As the women began gathering their purses and making awkward excuses, I caught sight of Eli in my peripheral vision. He had pulled out a small notebook, the kind he used for work investigations, and was writing something down. At the top of the page, I could just make out the words "witness list" and today's date. 12 names, 12 witnesses to what I'd thought was a moment of sophisticated honesty. As we drove home in silence, Maya fell asleep in her car seat, and Eli focused on the road with unusual intensity. I stared out the passenger window and tried to recapture the feeling of power I'd had at Jules's apartment. But something had shifted, like a foundation settling in ways you don't notice until the cracks appear. That night, after Maya was in bed, I found Eli in his study with the door locked. I could hear him typing, the steady rhythm of someone who had a lot to document. I knocked softly. "Honey, what are you working on?" "Case files," he called back. "Go to bed, Ivo. I'll be up late." I pressed my ear to the door and heard him on the phone with someone, his voice too low to make out words. But I caught fragments, witness statements, documentation, timeline. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off. This was Eli, my safety net, my predictable, boring husband who would never actually do anything dramatic or confrontational. I went to bed alone, but sleep was a long time coming. 3 days after the baby shower, I woke up to find Eli's side of the bed cold and empty. The clock read 3:47 a.m., and I could see light seeping under his study door down the hall. The soft clicking of keyboard keys echoed through the house like Morse code. I padded barefoot to Maya's room first, checking on her out of habit. She was sprawled across her twin bed, one arm hanging off the mattress, her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. 6 years old and still innocent of the adult complexities swirling around her. The study door was locked, as it had been every night since the party. I pressed my ear against the wood and heard Eli's voice, low and methodical. Profile active for 8 months. Bio reads exploring options, safety net at home. Timestamp shows last login yesterday at 2:14 p.m. My blood went cold. He was talking about my dating app profile. I'd been so careful. The app was hidden in a folder on my phone, disguised as a meditation app. I used a separate email address, cleared my browser history religiously, never logged in from our home Wi-Fi. How could he possibly have found it? Cloud backup extracted successfully. Chat history spans March through current date. Cloud backup. Oh God, I'd forgotten about the automatic cloud backup. My hands shaking, I crept back to our bedroom and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. With trembling fingers, I navigated to the app and tried to log in. Access denied, account under review. I tried again, same message. Panic rising in my throat, I opened my cloud storage account. The dating app folder was still there, but when I tried to access it, I got an error message. Files moved to secure archive. Eli had somehow gained access to my cloud account and moved everything. 8 months of conversations with Victor, photos I'd sent, plans we'd made, the explicit messages where I'd mocked Eli's stable but passionless career and called him sexually adequate but emotionally unavailable. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone screen, trying to process the implications. Eli wasn't just documenting anymore. He was actively investigating me, like I was one of his mail fraud cases. The typing from his study stopped abruptly. I heard his chair scrape against the floor, footsteps approaching the door. I quickly shoved my phone under my pillow and pretended to be asleep. The study door opened with a soft click. Eli's footsteps moved down the hall, paused outside our bedroom, then continued to the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open, the sound of him pouring a glass of water. When he returned to bed 20 minutes later, he moved carefully, trying not to wake me, but I could feel the tension radiating from his body as he lay down. He stared at the ceiling for a long time before his breathing finally evened out into sleep. The next morning, he was gone before Maya and I woke up. A note on the kitchen counter said he'd been called in early for a case review. His handwriting, usually neat and precise, looked somehow sharper than normal. At work, I tried to focus on my communications coordinator duties at the hospital, but my mind kept drifting to what Eli might have found in those chat logs. Victor and I had been so candid in our messages, so detailed about our physical relationship, so cruel in our assessments of my marriage. During my lunch break, I called Victor from the hospital parking lot. "We need to talk," I said as soon as he answered. "Ivo, what's wrong? You sound panicked." My husband found our messages, all of them. There was a long pause. Victor Quince was a wealth manager at First National, used to handling crises with cool professionalism, but I could hear the concern in his voice when he spoke again. How much does he know? Everything. The dating app, our conversations, probably our meeting schedule. He's some kind of investigator for the Postal Service, and he's treating this like a criminal case. "Calm down," Victor said, but his voice had lost its usual confident warmth. "He's your husband, not a prosecutor. What's the worst he can do? Ask for a divorce? You don't understand. Eli doesn't do anything halfway. When he investigates mail fraud, he builds cases that are absolutely airtight. He documents everything, interviews witnesses, creates timelines. He's methodical. So we'll be more careful. Use encrypted messaging, meet at different places. Victor, he recorded me at Jules's baby shower. He has 12 witnesses who heard me call you my lover and him my safety net." Another pause, longer this time. "You said that? In front of people?" I was being honest about our relationship. I thought it showed how mature and evolved I am. "Jesus, Ivo, that wasn't mature, that was stupid. The harshness in his voice stung. This wasn't how Victor usually talked to me. Usually he made me feel sophisticated, desired, intellectually stimulated. Now he sounded like he was talking to a liability. "Don't talk to me like that," I said. "I'm not your employee." "No, but you might have just made both of us everyone's business. I can't afford that kind of exposure. I have clients, a reputation, a career." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to cool things down for a while. Let this blow over." "Cool things down?" My voice rose and I looked around the parking lot to make sure no one could hear me. "You're abandoning me when I need you most?" "I'm being practical. Something you should have thought about before announcing our affair at a baby shower." The line went dead. Victor had hung up on me. I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, trying to process this new reality. My husband was building a case against me with the thoroughness of a federal investigator. My lover was distancing himself to protect his own interests, and I was alone in the middle of a situation I'd created but no longer controlled. That evening, Maya asked why Daddy was working so late again. "He's just busy with an important case, sweetheart," I told her as we ate dinner together at our kitchen table. "Is it about bad guys?" "Sort of." "Is he going to catch them?" I looked at my daughter's innocent face, her blonde hair catching the light from our overhead fixture, her small hands carefully cutting her chicken into precise bites the way Eli had taught her. "Yeah, baby," I said quietly. "I think he probably is." After Maya was in bed, I tried the study door again, still locked, but this time I could hear Eli on the phone with someone new. "Need notarized statements from each witness. Yes, I can provide the exact quote. He's my safety net. Victor gives me excitement. 12 people heard it. Notarized statements." He was turning the baby shower guests into official witnesses. I knocked on the door, harder this time. "Eli, we need to talk." The phone conversation stopped abruptly. "I'm busy, Evo." "This is ridiculous. You're acting like I committed a crime." The door opened so suddenly I stumbled forward. Eli stood in the doorway, blocking my view into his study, but I could see stacks of papers on his desk, printouts of what looked like screenshots, a timeline written on a whiteboard. "Fraud is a crime," he said calmly. "Forgery is a crime. Using someone's identity without permission is a crime." "What are you talking about?" "The joint investment account you opened with Victor, the one where you forged my signature on the application." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about that account. Victor had suggested it as a way to invest some of our savings in his cryptocurrency recommendations. I'd signed Eli's name because I knew he'd never agree to high-risk investments. "That's not... we're married. It's community property." "Not when you forge documents and lie to financial institutions. That's mail fraud, Evo, federal crime, my specialty." He started to close the door, but I pushed against it. "You can't be serious. You're going to have your own wife arrested. I'm going to document the facts and let the system work the way it's supposed to." "What about Maya? What about our family?" For the first time, his composure cracked slightly. I saw something flicker across his face, pain, maybe, or regret. "You should have thought about Maya before you decided to humiliate me in front of our friends and steal from our accounts." "I didn't steal anything. I invested our money." "You lost $19,000 of our money on Victor's cryptocurrency speculation, without my knowledge or consent, using forged documents." $19,000. I'd known the investments weren't doing well, but I hadn't realized how badly. "We can fix this," I said desperately. "I'll close the account. We'll get counseling. I'll end things with Victor." "It's too late for that." "Why?" "Because I already filed the complaint." The words hit me like a physical blow. Filed the complaint. With whom? The police, the FBI, his postal service investigators. "Eli, please, think about what you're doing." I have been thinking about it, for 3 days straight, thinking about how my wife has been lying to me for 8 months. thinking about how she mocked me to her lover, thinking about how she announced to our friends that I'm nothing more than a bank account and a babysitter. His voice remained calm and level, but I could see the fury underneath it now. Eli wasn't just hurt, he was coldly, methodically angry. I never said you were a bank account. You said I was a safety net. Same thing. That's not what I meant. It's what you said, in front of 12 witnesses, who I've now interviewed, who all remember exactly what you said and how you said it. He stepped back and closed the door. I heard the lock click into place. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to him return to work. The typing resumed, steady and relentless. Somewhere in that room, my husband was building a case that would destroy everything I'd thought was secure in my life. And for the first time since this started, I began to understand that my safety net might be about to disappear entirely. The next morning, I woke up to find a manila envelope on the kitchen counter with my name written in Eli's precise handwriting. Inside were printed copies of my dating app conversations with Victor, organized chronologically with timestamps and highlighted sections. My own words stared back at me from the pages. Eli's idea of foreplay is asking if I remembered to pay the electric bill. He's like a human savings account, boring but reliable. Sometimes I watch him organizing his sock drawer and wonder how I ended up married to an accountant's wet dream. At least he's good with Maya and doesn't question where I go on weekends. The highlighted sections were the worst ones, the messages where I'd been cruelest, most dismissive. Seeing them printed out in black and white, organized like evidence in a criminal case, made me realize how vicious I'd sounded. At the bottom of the stack was a note from Eli. Review for accuracy. Depositions begin Monday. Depositions. He was really doing this. I called in sick to work and drove straight to Victor's office at First National. The bank building was all glass and steel, designed to project success and stability. Victor's office was on the 15th floor, with a view of the city that made you feel powerful just sitting in his leather chairs. But when I walked in that morning, Victor looked anything but powerful. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Ivo," he said, standing up from behind his desk, "you can't be here. We need to talk about the account. Eli says we lost $19,000. We need to talk about a lot more than that." He moved to close his office door, then gestured for me to sit down. "I got a call yesterday from our compliance department. They're reviewing all my discretionary accounts." "What does that mean?" "It means someone reported suspicious activity, forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, possible fraud." "Eli, your husband is very thorough. He sent them copies of the original account application with signature analysis, wire transfer records, even phone recordings of our conversations about the investments." "Phone recordings? How could he have those?" Victor's face was grim. "Apparently, he's been monitoring your phone for weeks. Every call, every text, every app you use. He has software that captures everything." I felt sick. "That's illegal, isn't it? Spying on your wife?" "Not if he owns the phone plan, and you agreed to monitoring in the terms of service. Which you did, apparently, when you signed up for the family plan 3 years ago." I remembered signing those papers, but I'd never read the fine print. Who reads phone contracts? "So, what happens now?" "Now I'm suspended pending investigation. My access to client accounts is frozen. My trading privileges are revoked, and I'm probably going to lose my job." "But you didn't know I forged Eli's signature." "Didn't I?" Victor's voice was sharp. "You brought me documents with your husband's signature, but you were the only one who ever came to meetings. You were the only one who knew the account passwords. You made all the investment decisions. Any reasonable person would have questioned whether you had proper authorization. You never said anything, because I didn't want to know. The account was profitable at first, I was earning good commissions, and I was sleeping with the client. I had every incentive to look the other way." The The cold calculation in his voice shocked me. This wasn't the passionate, sophisticated man who had made me feel so alive for the past 8 months. This was a banker protecting himself from liability. So, you're throwing me under the bus? I'm acknowledging reality. Your husband has documented everything, Ivo. Every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, every lie you told to open that account. He's built a case that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. What about us? What about our relationship? Victor looked at me like I was insane. What relationship? You're a married woman who lied to me about her husband's involvement in a joint investment account. You used me to legitimize fraud. There is no us. That's not true. You said you loved me. I said a lot of things. People say things during affairs that they don't mean. I stared at him, finally seeing him clearly. Victor hadn't been my sophisticated lover, my intellectual equal, my escape from boring domesticity. He'd been a predator who saw an opportunity and took it, and now that the opportunity had become a liability, he was cutting me loose without a second thought. You're a coward, I said. I'm a realist, something you should try being. I left his office feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I caught sight of myself in the mirrored walls. I looked haggard, desperate, nothing like the confident woman who had announced her affair at a baby shower just a week ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules. Heard about the bank investigation. People are talking. Maybe you should lay low for a while. Then another from Tara. HR wants to see you first thing Monday. Something about conduct unbecoming. And another from Rosa, Eli's mother. Maya is welcome to stay with me until this situation resolves. She shouldn't be around this kind of chaos. Everyone was abandoning me. Everyone was choosing sides. And they were all choosing Eli. When I got home, I found him in the kitchen making Maya's lunch for school the next day. He looked up when I walked in, his expression neutral and polite, like I was a stranger he was being civil to. How was your day? He asked, as if nothing had changed. You know how my day was. You've destroyed my life. I've documented your choices. There's a difference. You've ruined my career, my relationship, my friendships. You did that when you decided to commit fraud and adultery. Maya wandered into the kitchen, still in her school clothes, her backpack dragging behind her. Daddy, can you help me with my math homework? Of course, sweetheart. His voice immediately warmed, became gentle and patient. Go get your workbook and I'll be right there. After she left, he turned back to me. Maya doesn't need to hear us fighting. We're not fighting. You're systematically destroying our marriage. Our marriage was already destroyed. I'm just making it official. Eli, please, think about what you're doing to our family. I am thinking about our family. I'm thinking about Maya growing up with a mother who lies and steals and cheats. I'm thinking about what kind of example that sets. So you're going to take her away from me? I'm going to make sure she has at least one parent she can trust. The finality in his voice terrified me. This wasn't the Eli I'd married, the quiet man who avoided confrontation and kept his feelings to himself. This was someone harder, more determined, someone who had decided I was the enemy and was treating me accordingly. What do you want from me? I asked desperately. Nothing. I want nothing from you, Ivo. I want you to face the consequences of what you've done, and I want to protect Maya from the fallout. And if I fight you, then you'll lose, because I have evidence and you have excuses. I have witnesses and you have lies. I have the law on my side and you have nothing. He was right, and we both knew it. In 8 months of affair and fraud, I'd been sloppy, careless, overconfident. I'd underestimated my boring, predictable husband and overestimated my own cleverness. Now I was about to learn exactly how thorough a postal inspector could be when he decided to build a case. That night, I lay in bed listening to Eli work in his study until the early hours of the morning. The typing never stopped, steady and methodical, like a countdown timer ticking toward my destruction. And for the first time since this began, I started to understand that my safety net hadn't just disappeared, it had become a trap. Monday morning arrived with a certified letter addressed to me, delivered by a postal worker who seemed to know exactly what he was delivering. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and required my signature to accept. Inside were copies of notarized statements from 8 of the 12 women who had attended Jules's baby shower. Each statement was identical in format, but personal in detail, describing exactly what I had said and how the room had reacted. Jules's statement was particularly damaging. Mrs. Marchant clearly stated that her husband was her safety net, while another man named Victor provided excitement, passion, and adventure. She appeared proud of this arrangement and seemed to expect approval from the group. The room fell silent, and several guests appeared uncomfortable or shocked. Carmen Rodriguez had been even more direct. Mrs. Marchant's statements were deliberately cruel toward her husband, who was present in the home at the time. She seemed to take pleasure in describing him as boring and predictable, while praising her lover's sophistication. It was the most uncomfortable social situation I have ever witnessed. Each statement was signed, dated, and notarized. Each one included the witness's contact information and a declaration that they would testify to these facts under oath if required. Eli had turned my moment of honesty into a legal document. My hands were shaking as I read through the statements. These women had been my friends, or at least my acquaintances. We'd shared baby showers and birthday parties, school fundraisers, and neighborhood barbecues. Now they were lined up as witnesses against me in whatever legal proceeding Eli was orchestrating. At work, the whispers started as soon as I walked into the hospital communications department. Tara Lynn avoided eye contact, busying herself with paperwork whenever I approached. The other coordinators clustered in small groups that disbanded when I walked by. Dr. Patricia Henley, our department head, called me into her office before lunch. "Evo, we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your conduct outside of work. My personal life has nothing to do with my job performance. It does when it affects your ability to represent this hospital professionally. We've received reports about inappropriate behavior at social gatherings, financial irregularities, and potential legal issues." Reports from whom? That's not relevant. What's relevant is that you're facing serious allegations that could reflect poorly on our institution. I realized that Eli's investigation had spread beyond our personal circle. He hadn't just documented my affair and the financial fraud. He'd made sure that everyone in my professional and social network knew about it. "Are you firing me?" "We're placing you on administrative leave pending the resolution of your legal issues, with pay for now. This is discrimination. This is damage control." I left the hospital that afternoon with a box of personal items and the growing realization that Eli's methodical approach was destroying every aspect of my life systematically. At home, I found him in the kitchen with Maya, helping her with an art project. They looked up when I walked in, and I saw something in my daughter's eyes that I'd never seen before, uncertainty about me. "Mummy, are you in trouble?" she asked. "No, sweetheart. Mummy's just dealing with some grown-up problems. Daddy says you might have to go away for a while." I shot a furious look at Eli. "Daddy shouldn't be telling you things like that." "Maya asked why you've been so upset lately," he said calmly. I told her the truth, that adults sometimes make mistakes that have consequences. She's 6 years old. She's smart enough to know something's wrong. She deserves honesty. Like the honesty you showed me when you started spying on my phone and investigating me like a criminal. I showed you exactly the same honesty you showed me. The difference is, my actions are legal. Maya looked back and forth between us, her small face creased with worry. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced?" she asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. I looked at Eli, waiting for him to answer, but he was waiting for me. "I don't know, baby," I said finally. "Maybe. Will I still live with both of you?" "You'll always live with Daddy," Eli said gently. "He'll make sure you're safe and taken care of." The implication was clear. I might not be part of that equation. That evening, after Maya was in bed, I confronted Eli in his study. The door was unlocked for the first time in a week, and I could see the full scope of his investigation spread across his desk and whiteboard. There were timeline charts showing my movements over the past 8 months, screenshots of my dating app profile and messages, bank records showing the unauthorized transfers, signature analysis comparing my handwriting to Eli's on the forged documents, phone records showing calls and texts with Victor. It was overwhelming in its thoroughness. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About the affair? Since March. About the financial fraud? Since April." "You've known for months and said nothing." I was gathering evidence, building a case, making sure I had enough documentation to protect Maya and recover our stolen assets. "So you let me keep digging myself deeper." "I let you make your own choices. Every lie, every forged signature, every cruel message about me, those were your decisions. You could have confronted me. We could have worked it out." "Could we? Because when you finally told the truth at Jules's baby shower, you weren't confessing or apologizing. You were bragging." He was right. I had been bragging. I'd been proud of my sophisticated arrangement, my modern approach to marriage, my brave honesty about my needs. "What happens now?" "Now you face the consequences. The federal complaint has been filed. The divorce papers will be served next week. The asset recovery process has begun." "What about Maya?" "Maya will be fine. She'll live with me, visit with my mother when I'm working, and hopefully learn that actions have consequences. You can't take her away from me." "I'm not taking her away. You're losing custody because you committed crimes that demonstrate unfitness as a parent." "Adultery isn't a crime." "Fraud is. Forgery is. Identity theft is. And doing all of those things while caring for a child shows a pattern of poor judgment and moral unfitness." I stared at the evidence covering his desk, finally understanding the scope of what he'd built against me. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a complete legal destruction of my life, methodically planned and perfectly executed. "You really hate me," I said. "I don't hate you, Ivo. I just don't trust you anymore. And I won't let you hurt Maya the way you hurt me." "I never meant to hurt anyone. You meant to hurt me. You enjoyed hurting me. You told 12 people how boring and inadequate I am while praising the man you were cheating with. That was deliberate cruelty." "I was just being honest about our relationship." "No, you were being honest about your contempt for our relationship. There's a difference." I left his study that night knowing that my marriage was over, and my life as I'd known it was about to end. Eli had spent months building an airtight case against me, and I had spent those same months providing him with all the evidence he needed. My safety net had become my prosecutor, and he was very, very good at his job. The process server found me at the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the cereal aisle, trying to decide between Maya's favorite sugary options and the healthier alternatives Eli preferred, when a woman in a business suit approached me. "Ivolina Marchant." "Yes?" "You've been served." She handed me a thick manila envelope and walked away before I could respond. Around me, other shoppers pretended not to stare, while obviously listening to every word. I abandoned my cart and sat in my car in the parking lot to read the documents. Divorce petition, asset freeze order, emergency custody motion, restraining order, preventing me from accessing our joint accounts. And at the bottom of the stack, a federal criminal complaint for mail fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft. The charges carried potential sentences of up to 20 years in prison. I drove home in a daze, the legal documents scattered across my passenger seat like evidence of my own destruction. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Eli's postal service vehicle already there. He was home early, probably expecting this moment. Inside, I found him helping Maya with her homework at the kitchen table, the picture of domestic normalcy. He looked up when I walked in, his expression carefully neutral. "How was your day?" he asked, as if he didn't know exactly how my day had gone. "You know how my day was." "Daddy, what's wrong with Mommy?" Maya asked, looking between us with growing anxiety. "Mummy received some important papers today," Eli said gently. "Grown-up stuff that she needs to think about." I slammed the legal documents down on the counter. "Important papers. You're trying to have me arrested and take away my daughter." "I'm protecting my daughter from a parent who commits crimes and lies about it." "Our daughter." "We'll see what the court says about that." Maya started crying. The sound cut through our argument like a knife, reminding both of us that our 6-year-old was witnessing the complete destruction of her family. "I want you both to stop fighting," she sobbed. "I want everything to go back to normal." Eli immediately went to her, kneeling beside her chair and pulling her into a hug. "I know, sweetheart. I know this is scary and confusing, but sometimes adults have to make hard decisions to keep everyone safe." "Safe from what?" "From people who make bad choices and hurt other people." Maya looked at me over Eli's shoulder, her eyes red and confused. "Did Mommy hurt somebody?" "Mommy hurt Daddy," Eli said quietly. "And she hurt our family by lying and taking money that didn't belong to her." "I never took money," I protested. "You forged my signature on investment documents and lost $19,000 of our savings without my knowledge or consent. That's theft." "It was our money. We're married." "Marriage doesn't give you the right to commit fraud." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain how Victor had convinced me the investments were safe. But Maya was still crying, and I realized that every word I said was making things worse for her. "Can we please not do this in front of Maya?" I asked. "You should have thought about Maya before you decided to commit crimes." That night, I called my sister in Phoenix, the first time I'd reached out to family since this nightmare began. "Lisa, I need help." "Evo, what's wrong? You sound terrible." I told her everything. The affair, the financial fraud, the legal charges, the divorce. She listened in silence until I finished. "Jesus, Evo, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking I deserved to be happy. I was thinking one person can't meet all your needs." "So you decided to cheat on your husband and steal money?" "I didn't steal anything. I invested our savings." "Without telling him, using forged documents. That's stealing, Evo." "You're supposed to be on my side." "I'm supposed to tell you the truth, and the truth is, you screwed up badly. Really, really badly." "Can you lend me money for a lawyer?" "I can't afford to get involved in a federal fraud case. I have my own family to protect." "So you're abandoning me too." "I'm being realistic. You need to face what you've done and figure out how to make it right." "How do I make it right? Eli has evidence of everything. He's turned all our friends against me. He's trying to take Maya away." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you had an affair and committed fraud." After she hung up, I sat in my empty living room and tried to figure out what to do next. Every option seemed to lead to more humiliation, more legal trouble, more loss. I could fight the charges, but Eli's evidence was overwhelming. I could try to negotiate, but he'd made it clear he wanted nothing from me. I could flee, but that would only make me look more guilty and guarantee I'd lose Maya forever. I was trapped in a situation entirely of my own making, facing an opponent who had spent months preparing for this moment. Over the next few days, the social isolation became complete. Jules blocked my number. Tara avoided me at the hospital before I was placed on leave. The other baby shower guests crossed the street when they saw me coming. Even the neighbors started treating me differently. Mrs. Patterson, who had always been friendly, now barely nodded when I got the mail. The Johnsons, who used to let Maya play with their kids, suddenly had reasons why their children couldn't come over. Eli had done more than build a legal case against me. He'd systematically destroyed my social support network by making sure everyone knew exactly what I'd done. But the worst part was Maya's growing distance. She still hugged me goodnight, still said she loved me, but there was a wariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was starting to see me the way everyone else did, as someone who had made terrible choices and hurt the people she was supposed to protect. One evening, as I was helping her get ready for bed, she asked me a question that broke my heart. "Mummy, are you a bad person?" "No, sweetheart. Mummy made some mistakes, but I'm not a bad person." "Daddy says people who lie and steal are bad people." "Daddy is angry with me right now. Sometimes when grown-ups are angry, they say things that aren't completely fair." "But did you lie and steal?" I looked at my daughter's innocent face and realized I had a choice. I could continue lying, continue making excuses, continue trying to justify my actions, or I could tell her the truth and accept the consequences. "Yes," I said quietly. "I did lie and steal, and I hurt Daddy very badly." "Why?" "Because I was selfish and I thought I could get away with it." "Are you sorry?" "Yes, baby. I'm very, very sorry." She hugged me then, but it felt different, like she was saying goodbye to the mother she thought she knew. That night, I found Eli in his study, working on his case files as usual. "She asked me if I'm a bad person," I said from the doorway. He looked up from his computer. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that I lied and stole and hurt you." "Good. Good. Your daughter is traumatized and you think that's good?" "My daughter is learning that actions have consequences. That's a valuable lesson. She's 6 years old. She's old enough to understand right and wrong, something you apparently never learned." I stood there for a long moment, looking at this man I'd been married to for 8 years, trying to find some trace of the gentle, patient person I'd fallen in love with. But that person was gone, replaced by someone harder and more determined. "Is there any way to fix this?" I asked. "You can plead guilty, accept responsibility, and minimize the damage to Maya." "What about ours? What about our marriage?" "Our marriage ended the day you decided I wasn't enough for you." "I never said you weren't enough. You said I was a safety net. You said Victor gave you everything I couldn't. You mocked my career and my personality to your lover. You stole our money to impress him." "I made mistakes." "You made choices. Every day for 8 months, you chose to lie to me, cheat on me, and steal from me. Those weren't mistakes. They were deliberate decisions. So there's no forgiveness, no second chances. There are consequences, and you're going to face every single one of them." He turned back to his computer, dismissing me. I went to bed that night knowing that my safety net was gone forever, and that the man I'd thought was boring and predictable had turned out to be the most dangerous opponent I could have imagined. Because he wasn't motivated by anger or revenge, he was motivated by justice. And justice, I was learning, could be absolutely merciless. The corporate town hall meeting was supposed to be routine. Hospital administrators discussing budget allocations, new policies, staff recognition. I'd attended dozens of these events over my 5 years as communications coordinator, usually sitting in the back, taking notes, preparing press releases about our community outreach programs. But this time felt different from the moment I walked into the auditorium. Conversation stopped when people saw me. Colleagues who used to greet me warmly now looked away. The whispers followed me to my seat like a toxic cloud. Dr. Patricia Henley was at the podium, discussing our quarterly patient satisfaction scores, when I noticed the man in the dark suit standing near the side entrance. He was holding a manila envelope and scanning the crowd with the methodical attention of someone looking for a specific person. Process server. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it could be for anyone. The hospital was always dealing with legal issues, malpractice suits, contract disputes, regulatory compliance. It didn't have to be about me. Dr. Henley finished her presentation and called for a 10-minute break before the budget review. That's when the man in the suit started walking directly toward my row. "Ivolina Marchant?" The auditorium wasn't completely quiet, but it was quiet enough that his voice carried. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Everyone within 3 rows could hear him clearly. "Yes," I whispered, hoping he would lower his voice. "You've been served." He handed me the thick envelope and walked away, leaving me sitting in a room full of colleagues and supervisors who had just witnessed me being served with legal papers during a hospital meeting. The envelope was heavier than the previous ones, stuffed with documents that felt substantial and final. I could feel dozens of eyes watching as I tried to decide whether to open it immediately or wait until I could find privacy. The curiosity won. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document, Emergency Asset Seizure Order. Effective immediately, all assets in my name were frozen pending resolution of federal fraud charges. My bank accounts, my car, even my jewelry. Everything was now under court control. The second document was worse, amended criminal complaint. The federal prosecutors had added new charges based on additional evidence Eli had provided. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The potential sentence had increased to 35 years. But the third document was the one that destroyed me completely. Full custody order. Maya was now officially in Eli's sole custody. I was granted supervised visitation only, pending psychological evaluation and completion of a parenting fitness program. I was no longer legally allowed to be alone with my own daughter. The papers shook in my hands as I read through the detailed findings. The court had determined that my pattern of dishonesty, financial crimes, and moral unfitness made me a potential danger to Maya's well-being. Eli had provided evidence that I'd used our daughter as cover for my affair, lying about where I was going and what I was doing while she was in my care. "Everything okay, Evo?" I looked up to see Tara Lynn standing beside my seat, her expression a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed satisfaction. She'd positioned herself so she could read over my shoulder, and I could tell from her face that she'd seen enough to understand what was happening. "I'm fine," I managed to say. "Those look like serious legal documents." "It's a private matter." "Is it related to the investigation everyone's been talking about?" Before I could answer, Dr. Henley called for everyone to return to their seats, but the damage was done. Tara had seen the court orders, and by the time the meeting ended, everyone in the hospital would know that I'd been served with federal criminal charges and lost custody of my daughter. I left the auditorium without waiting for the budget presentation, clutching the legal documents and trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. But I could feel the stares, hear the whispers starting up again behind me. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and called the one person I thought might still be willing to help me. "Jules, it's Evo. Please don't hang up." "I shouldn't be talking to you. My lawyer said I might have to testify." "Testify about what?" "About what you said at my baby shower, about your affair and how you talked about Eli." "Jules, I'm losing everything. They've taken Maya away from me. They've frozen all my assets. I'm facing 35 years in prison." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on your husband and steal money." "I never stole money. I invested our savings." "Without his knowledge, using forged documents. That's stealing, Evo." "Everyone keeps saying that, but we were married. It was community property." "Marriage doesn't give you the right to forge your husband's signature and lie to banks." "I need help. I need someone to believe in me." "I can't help you. I have my own family to protect, and getting involved in your legal problems could hurt my husband's business." "So you're abandoning me too?" "I'm protecting myself from someone who has shown she can't be trusted." The line went dead. I sat in the hospital parking lot for another hour, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't go home. The asset seizure order meant I might not even be allowed in the house. I couldn't see Maya without supervision. I couldn't access my bank accounts to hire a lawyer. Eli had systematically destroyed every aspect of my life, and he'd done it so methodically that I had no recourse, no appeal, no way to fight back. When I finally drove home, I found him in the kitchen making dinner for Maya. She was at the table doing homework, looking small and sad but safe. They both looked up when I walked in. "Mommy," Maya started to get up, but Eli gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart. Mommy can visit, but she can't be alone with you right now. Why not? Because the court says so. Because Mommy made some very serious mistakes that broke the law. Maya looked at me with confusion and hurt. Are you going to jail, Mommy? I don't know, baby. Probably, Eli said quietly. The federal prosecutors are recommending a plea agreement of 12 years in exchange for full restitution and cooperation. 12 years. Maya would be 18 when I got out. She'd grow up without me, thinking of me as the mother who chose an affair and financial fraud over her family. What about the house? I asked. The house is in my name only. You signed a quitclaim deed 3 years ago when we refinanced. You probably don't remember because you didn't read the documents. You planned this. I protected my assets when I realized my wife was a criminal. I'm not a criminal. You forged documents, stole money, and committed fraud. That's the definition of a criminal. Maya started crying, the sound cutting through our argument like it always did. I want everyone to stop fighting, she sobbed. I want Mommy to come home and everything to be normal again. Mommy can't come home, sweetheart, Eli said gently, kneeling beside her chair. She broke some very important rules, and now she has to face the consequences. What consequences? She's going to have to go away for a while, to a place where people go when they break the law. Prison? Yes. Maya looked at me with eyes full of tears and confusion. Why did you break the law, Mommy? It was the question I'd been avoiding for weeks, the one I'd tried to answer with excuses and justifications and blame. But sitting there, looking at my daughter's heartbroken face, I finally understood that there was only one honest answer. Because I was selfish, baby. Because I wanted things I couldn't have, and I was willing to hurt people to get them. Did you want to hurt me and Daddy? No. I thought I could have everything I wanted without hurting anyone. But I was wrong. Are you sorry? Yes, I'm more sorry than I've ever been about anything. She got up from her chair and hugged me, and for a moment I thought maybe there was still hope, still a chance to salvage something from the wreckage of my choices. But then Eli's phone rang, and I heard him answer with his official voice. Yes, she's here. Yes, I understand. We'll be waiting. He hung up and looked at me with something that might have been pity. That was the federal marshals. They're coming to arrest you. Now. There's been a development. Victor Quince was arrested this afternoon for running a cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme. He's agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. That includes testifying about your role in the fraud. What role? I was a victim too. According to his statement, you knew the investments were fraudulent. You helped him recruit other victims by using your position at the hospital to access patient financial information. That's not true. It doesn't matter what's true anymore, Ivo. It matters what can be proven in court, and Victor has evidence that you were a willing participant in his scheme. The sound of car doors slamming outside announced the arrival of the federal marshals. Through the kitchen window, I could see black SUVs in our driveway, men in suits walking toward our front door. Maya clung to me, crying harder now. Don't let them take Mommy away, she begged Eli. I can't stop them, sweetheart. This is what happens when people break the law. The doorbell rang, followed by loud knocking. Federal marshals. We have a warrant for the arrest of Ivolina Marchant. Eli looked at me one last time, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Not anger or satisfaction, but genuine sadness. You could have had everything, Ivo. A good marriage, a beautiful daughter, a stable life. But it wasn't enough for you. I know. You threw it all away for a man who never cared about you and money that was never real. I know. And now Maya has to grow up knowing her mother chose strangers over her family. The knocking got louder, more insistent. I have to answer the door, Eli said. I kissed Maya one last time, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, trying to memorize the feel of her small arms around my neck. I love you, baby. No matter what happens, remember that Mommy loves you. I love you too, Mommy. Eli opened the front door, and 3 federal marshals entered our kitchen. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes but an implacable expression, approached me with handcuffs. "Ivolina Marchant, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent." As she read me my rights, I looked around our kitchen one last time. At the refrigerator covered with Maya's artwork. At the table where we'd eaten thousands of meals as a family. At Eli, holding our crying daughter, watching his wife being arrested for crimes that had destroyed everything we'd built together. I'd called him my safety net, like it was something cute and clever. Now I understood that safety nets only work if you don't deliberately cut the ropes. The marshals led me out of my house in handcuffs, past neighbors who had gathered to watch, past reporters who had somehow learned about the arrest, past the wreckage of a life I'd demolished with my own choices. As the SUV pulled away from my house, I caught one last glimpse of Eli in the kitchen window, still holding Maya, still being the steady, reliable man I'd thought was too boring to appreciate, my safety net, the one I'd destroyed because I thought I deserved something more exciting. 3 years later, I pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Victor received 12 years for running the Ponzi scheme. The $19,000 we'd lost was never recovered. Eli divorced me while I was in prison and married a kindergarten teacher named Sarah 2 years later. Maya calls her mom now and visits me twice a year, polite but distant, like I'm a relative she barely knows. I sit in my cell sometimes and think about that baby shower, about the moment I announced my affair, like it was something to be proud of, about how I thought I was being sophisticated and modern and brave, about how I called my husband my safety net, like it was cute, like it was something to laugh about. But Eli stopped smiling that day, and he never smiled at me again, because he understood something I was too selfish to see. Safety nets are precious things, built from trust and love and years